Don't you just love classic horror movies? You know, like the one where the mad scientist gets body parts and electricity and brings about new life? You're thinking about Frankenhooker, right? Frankenhooker was directed in 1990 by Frank Henenlotter, who's responsible for other cult classics like the Basket Case series and Brain Damage. It follows Elizabeth, who dies in a tragic accident on her father's birthday, but her mad scientist fiancé is willing to go to sinister lengths to bring her back. I think this era of exploitation films and scream queens is super interesting, and for me, this film stands out even in that category for its unique style. I've been wanting to watch it for a while and I thought it'd be the perfect movie for my next video. So if a gender-bent vulgar take on the classic Frankenstein story sounds interesting to you, I hope you'll stay tuned while I dive into it. Before I get started, I want to thank you guys for all the support on my first two videos. I know I'm far from professional, but I just really enjoy watching movies, so I'm glad you guys tune in with me. Please like, subscribe, and comment so you can stay tuned as I release more videos. The movie starts with our main character Jeffrey Franken, working on a brain with an eyeball right in the middle of it. Its vision is connected to a monitor and he's trying to make it focus on him. He starts poking it with a scalpel and even hammering the scalpel in deeper. This makes the brain kind of wake up and look around, so he gets excited. He loves digging in the brain. He's interrupted when his soon-to-be mother-in-law asks him to pass the ketchup. It turns out this setting is his soon-to-be father-in-law's birthday party. Why would he bring it all the way to his in-law's house, weirdo? The mother-in-law goes outside and tells his fiancée Elizabeth that Jeffrey's at it again. She also tells Elizabeth to watch the pretzels for her own sake. Elizabeth's friend walks over and asks if there's a problem, and she says, "Oh no, it's just the usual. Jeffrey's too weird and I'm too fat." She's supposed to be wearing a fat suit, but really it just looks like an ill-fitting bodysuit. She tells the friend that no matter what she does, she can't lose any weight. She's tried every kind of diet and even tried letting Jeffrey staple her stomach. The friend is confused and asks if Jeffrey's a doctor, and she says no, but kind of, sort of. He's an electrician, but he's a doctor on the side a little bit. She says he's a bioelectrical technician, and he's even been kicked out of medical schools multiple times. The friend can't believe she would let him work on her, but they're going to be married soon, so why shouldn't she? She goes inside and asks Jeffrey what he's working on. He doesn't know, but he says he can fix it. She convinces him to go outside and work on it later. Now it's time for the birthday cake, and Elizabeth has a surprise for her dad. Elizabeth excitedly shows her dad the new gift, and it's a brand new lawnmower. Jeffrey has even modified it to be remote control. Elizabeth is very eager to show her dad how it works and tries to give him a demonstration. Jeffrey warns her not to stand in front of it, but she's not listening and goes on with it anyway. She turns it on high speed while she's right in front of it, and she's instantly ground to a pulp. Then lightning rolls in the title card, Frankenhooker. During the opening credits, we see Jeffrey working on the blueprint for a body and channeling his inner young Sheldon. He literally says something like E equals MC squared right here. As the camera zooms out, we see pictures of Elizabeth all over the wall, and he's even taped Elizabeth's face to the blueprint, so we know he's trying to bring her back. After a hard day of BSing around a Smart Max, and he goes over and puts in the tape of the news segment about Elizabeth's death. On the news segment, the reporters talk about her like true crime TikTokers, saying that her personality rained down over everybody and saying that she became a tossed human salad. Talk about insensitive. On the news segment, they tell us that some of Elizabeth's body parts are missing, namely her head. They approach Jeffrey and ask him if he knows anything about the body parts. He says no, but looks very suspicious before the segment ends. After he watches it, his mom walks in. She tells him she's really worried about him and mentions that the girl from the supermarket was asking about him again, but Jeffrey says he's not interested. She tells Jeffrey that Elizabeth is gone. He can't just hide in his room forever. You know, after a certain point, this might be true, but I'm assuming she literally just died. Like, give bro some time to grieve. She's not even in the ground good yet. Her head's still missing. You talking about he needs to get a new girl. She tells him he needs to find a new woman, and he says that's exactly what he's working on. But she doesn't understand how he could find a new woman while being cooped up in his room. She tells him he should go back to medical school, but he doesn't want to do that. She's very upset because she always thought he was going to be an amazing doctor. While she's talking, she gets distracted by his brain with an eye that's now up and running, which apparently he still doesn't even know what it is. Jeffrey actually opens up to his mom and tells her that he doesn't know what's wrong with him and he's losing his mind more and more every day. But newsflash, it's the 90s, no one cares about that crap. So all she can muster up for him is, "Do you want a sandwich?" Wow, let's give it up for Mom of the Year, guys. He tells her no thanks because he's getting his own food tonight, and she walks away. He goes outside into a shed where we see he has a full-on Frankenstein's laboratory. I'm gonna need to work for this guy's electric company. How can he afford all this equipment? He goes over to a cooler that's full of purple liquid and starts talking to it. He reaches in and the camera cuts to a romantic dinner with Elizabeth's remaining body parts. He tells her the baths are making her glow and even pours some wine in her mouth, which of course seeps right through her neck. During this wonderfully romantic evening, he tells her that he can bring her back in 2 days when the giant storm comes. He's so considerate, he even shows her the models of what she could look like when she comes back. But these models are just dirty magazine cutouts with her face taped over them. Yeah, I'm sure that's how she wants to look. Nothing about what you want, right? To conclude this romantic dinner, he reads her a poem for dessert. Back in his room, he's trying to figure out how to get the body parts to bring Elizabeth back. He knows he'll have to take a life to bring hers back, but he has to figure out how to do it without getting caught. To help him brainstorm, he decides to drill a hole in his brain. The first idea he gets is to abduct some stewardesses off a plane. However, he quickly decides that won't work, so he drills again. This time he gets the idea to go across the river to the city and get some prostitutes. He says he needs good parts and they have all the good parts you could buy. And who else wants to sell their parts more than they do? Jeffrey drives into the city to find his perfect body parts. As he's driving, he's checking out all the women on the corner with binoculars and hyper-analyzing all their body parts to find the right one. Finally, he decides on a corner and pulls in. One girl walks up to his car and he tells her he's looking for the right parts, so she pulls her shirt down to show that she has them and she has them in the right places. She asks if he has any money, and when he pulls out his stack, she tries to jump in his car as fast as she can. She gotta get to the bag. He won't let her in the car though because he says he needs more girls. He tells her he needs 6 or 7 girls, and the story he comes up with is that he's having a party for his sick brother, and he wants to have sort of a beauty contest for him. The girl says that should be fine, but they have to run it by their pimp Zorro first. Zorro? Like from One Piece? What's he doing here? I didn't know Zorro was pimping during the time skip. They go into a bar and the woman behind the counter named Spike tells them Zorro's in the back. They go into the back to a rundown bathroom and Zorro's standing in the middle of it dealing out drugs. The girl goes over and whispers to Zorro before calling Jeffrey over. They tell him it's a deal, but he'll have to pay up because Zorro has the best girls. Before Jeffrey leaves, he asks Zorro about the little bags he's been handing out, and Zorro pulls out some of the crack he's been dealing. Back at home, Jeffrey devises a plan to make super crack. Crack that's so super, even Dave Chappelle's character Tyrone Biggums couldn't handle it.
Peanut butter and crack's in it.
He tries to make himself feel better by saying crack will kill you anyways. This one just does it much faster. While he's conjuring up super crack, the TV is playing a segment about a woman advocating for the legalization of prostitution for the safety of the women involved, the prostitutes. The name of the organization is Hookers. Hold on to our knowledge of equal rights. They roll a clip to show just how bad the women on the street have it, and Jeffrey imagines that Zorro is harassing Elizabeth, who then calls Jeffrey for help. I guess he's having some guilt and second thoughts about what he's about to do to all these women, so he drills yet another hole in his head to make himself feel better. He even convinces himself that he's not even really committing murder. He's not shooting them or stabbing them, so he's not the one killing them. He's just putting something deadly in front of them that they can choose to use if they want to. He's not making them use it, they're just crack fiends. He decides to use a guinea pig as his guinea pig for the killer crack. He puffs some smoke into this tank and waits for it to inhale it. When the guinea pig finally inhales the fumes, it literally pops into 4 pieces, and Jeffrey notes that this might get messy. The time has finally come to enact his evil plan, and he gets all of his things together and goes back to the city. When he gets back to the corner, he's greeted by a prostitute named Honey, who tells him to come up to the room. Honey leads him to the hotel room where a gaggle of hookers are waiting for him. Honey then explains to them that Jeffrey here, or as she calls him, Jersey Boy, wants to play doctor. He's allowed to examine them as much as he wants. If he does anything more than that, they should let Honey know. He is good friends with Zorro, so Zorro gave him a very good rate. Now it's time for Jeffrey to pick out his perfect body, so he meticulously judges each and every inch of all the girls and picks his perfect body part from each one of them. During this free examination, Zorro comes downstairs to wait for his girls. After 30 minutes have passed, Honey tells Jeff it's time for him to pick his perfect girl because the rest of them have to go to work. But now Jeff is having a moral dilemma and he can't go through with it. They don't understand what's happening, and so they just want their money. He throws them the bag of money and they find the money, but they also find the killer crack and they go crazy. He tries to tell them not to do it, that they don't know what they're getting into, but it's too late. Their party has started. They all start undressing and smoking the crack and going crazy as Jeffrey pleads with them to stop. At one point, 2 girls start kissing and Jeffrey tells them not to do that it's unnatural and their bodies weren't meant for that. Crazy talk from a guy that made super crack to kill prostitutes and is going to use their body parts to make his wife. Finally, the killer crack starts kicking in and all the prostitutes start literally exploding. Downstairs, Zorro is getting impatient and he heads upstairs to try and find out what his girls are doing. Zorro's banging on the door and he hears exploding inside and doesn't know what's going on. The only prostitute left standing is Honey, who's about to take her revenge on Jeffrey before she explodes too. Right as she explodes, Zorro busts in the room and Honey's head flies into his and knocks him out with a big... sounds like he was sitting under a coconut tree at the wrong time. Jeffrey is left in the room of massacred body parts, and he starts apologizing to the girls. He tells them that he'll make it right, and he'll fix all of them after he fixes Elizabeth first. He then puts all the body parts into big garbage bags and sneaks out the window. Back in his laboratory, it's time for him to make Elizabeth. He picks out the perfect hand, the perfect boobs, and the perfect legs. He says there's one final detail as he goes to pull Elizabeth's head out of the cooler. With Elizabeth assembled, he dumps all the leftover hooker parts in the cooler. He tells them again that in due time he'll make it right with all of them and fix all of them, but tonight is for Elizabeth. He goes over to her head and tells her he loves her, and he knows things won't be the same, but maybe they'll even be better. Yeah, I'm sure they will be better for you, Jeff. The time has finally come as he hoists the platform up into the storm. When the platform gets all the way to the top, lightning strikes and the orb on it goes an ominous green. However, the platform isn't the only thing that's struck, as lightning goes into the lab and strikes the cooler where all the body parts are. The cooler starts shaking and glowing purple, so I can only assume that the body parts have gained life as well now. He pulls the platform back down, and now the body is no longer laying, but rather standing on the platform covered by the cloth. He pulls the cloth down, and there she is in all of her glory. Frankenhooker. Jeffrey is amazed that it actually worked. He calls out to Elizabeth, but she responds with,
"Want a date? Going out? Looking for some action?"
Yeah, she's not on that honeymoon mindset. She's trying to get to the bag like Natalie Nunn. No, like, she really is trying to get her baddie Jane, because when he says it's me, Jeffrey, she asks if he has money. When he tells her he doesn't, she just knocks his ass out. When she exits the lab, she walks away in Frankenstein style. Elizabeth roams down the street, and we see her enter a subway. Everyone on the subway stares at her in amazement or disgust or fear. Jeffrey wakes up in the lab with no Elizabeth in sight. When he thinks about what she said, he knows exactly where she's going and hops in his car to chase after her. Now Elizabeth has left the subway station. She gets off the train in the Big Apple, and she wastes no time trying to live up to her namesake, the hooker part anyways. She asks every man around if he wants a date or if he's got money, and whenever they say no, she pushes his ass out of the way. She even pushes one dude in the street in front of a car. Finally, an old man is absolutely amazed by her and is drooling to go with her. They go back to the motel where the prostitutes were blown up and go into one of the rooms upstairs. This whole time, the only thing she's been saying are the lines that the prostitutes that made her said before they died. When they get to the room, the man gets undressed and she does too. But when she hops on top, the electricity from her body literally surges into him and he explodes. She holds his head in her hands and he says,
"That was wonderful."
Jeffrey has made it back to the city, and he's at the same subway stop that Elizabeth came out of. He's asking everybody if they've seen her because her features are obviously very different, but nobody's seen anything and they just tell him to go away. He hops back in the car and drives off again. Elizabeth is now dressed again and leaves the room after taking her fee. She's quickly stopped by the man 2 rooms over who decides to force himself upon her and put his tongue in her mouth. He gets a nasty little surprise though, as her electricity surges into him too. He blows up as well and his head flies through the window into a garbage can where he belongs. Jeffrey drives up to a corner and asks a couple of prostitutes about Elizabeth. When he tells them the detail about the Z on their arm, they say that's Zorro's girls and they're all gone, which makes him look highly suspicious like always. Elizabeth is walking down the street shouting the same lines over and over again. She eventually wanders into a bar where Zorro is talking to a man about how his girls blew up. When Elizabeth sees pretzels on the bar, her inner big back awakens and she starts stuffing her face. Spike behind the bar says the same exact line her mom said in the beginning about taking it easy on the pretzels, and Elizabeth growls at her. The man talking to Zorro takes notice of her and instantly turns around to try and riz her up. The man tries to flirt with Frankenhooker, but of course she can only say the same mindless responses over and over again. She does, however, say Zorro's name, which catches Zorro's attention. The man takes her over to a table and Zorro follows behind to listen. The man starts telling her how beautiful she is and how she needs a man like him to protect her, and she utters the line about how she has the right parts in the right places. The man decides to take the challenge of being New York's biggest eater, but when he goes into the table, he learns there's a price to pay for being the biggest eater in the biggest city. We see his legs shaking and smoke coming under the table before he explodes too. Jeffrey arrives outside and he starts asking again where Elizabeth is. A sign-wearing man points him in the right direction, so he runs to the bar. Back in the bar, Zorro approaches Frankenhooker. He tells her those body parts aren't hers and he wants to know what she is. When she won't respond, he punches her in the head and her head rolls back and electricity shoots out of her neck. Finally, Jeffrey arrives on scene scene and he finds Elizabeth. He pushes her head back into place and hurries her outside into his car. When he gasses, her head falls back again as he exits. Zorro watches them leave and calls a taxi so he can follow them to their house. When Jeffrey gets Elizabeth back home, he puts classic Frankenstein bolts and staples in her neck to keep her head together. He tries to electrocute her again to bring her back, and at first she doesn't do anything. He starts talking to her, and when he says, "You're not a hooker, Elizabeth," she wakes up and says, "Of course I'm not, why would you say that?" And now Elizabeth is finally back. At first she's confused, but when Jeffrey explains what happened, she's amazed and tells Jeffrey he can change the world. Jeffrey tries to play it cool and says his recipe is estrogen based, so he can only save women anyway, so it's not that big a deal. Good things can't last forever as Elizabeth looks down and realizes her body is not her own. She gets really upset and Jeffrey just says, "Oh well, I had to use other body parts, but it doesn't matter because she's back and he loves her and they can be together and that's all that matters." Their reunion is cut short as Zorro sneaks in behind and chops Jeffrey's head off with one slice. Okay, it really is Zorro, guys. He did one sword style. Elizabeth asks who he is, but he says that he knows who she is and he knows all of his hookers are what made her. He calls all the hookers by name and says he knows what'll get their head in the right space as he pulls out another baggie of his lesser crack. Hearing their names, the hooker body parts are awoken, and the cooler turns over and we see an amalgamation of monster hooker parts come out. They remind me a lot of some of the monster versions from The Thing. They drag Zorro back in his cooler where he meets his demise. Elizabeth is now left with Jeffrey's head and she gets the perfect idea. Jeffrey wakes up to Elizabeth in a doctor's outfit and he doesn't know what happened. She tells him that he died, but it's okay because she was able to bring him back. But she had to make some changes because after all, his recipe is estrogen based, so she had to use woman parts. The camera zooms out and it shows his reflection so we can see he has the body of a woman. Jeffrey starts freaking out, but Elizabeth feeds him the same exact lines he said. "I had to do this, and it doesn't matter because I love you and we can be together." Oh, you don't like it when she's on the other foot, huh? And the movie ends with Jeffrey's face of despair. And that's Frankenhooker. I thought this movie was really awesome, and I love this era of movies in general. The practical effects mixed with elements of comedy just can't miss. I also love this new take on the classic story of Frankenstein. There have been criticisms of this movie that it's over-sexualized, but it's meant to have a feminist message. It's meant to comment on women's control over their own body and how they're viewed by men. Jeffrey's character at first seems to have good intentions. It seems like he just really cares about and loves Elizabeth and will do anything to bring her back. But when we see the way he goes about it, it's clear he's only doing it for himself. And he's almost happy that he gets to make personal upgrade to his fiance's body, like during the montage where he's picking out the body parts. He's measuring and scrutinizing every inch of the woman's body. And he's not doing that for Elizabeth's sake. My least favorite part of the movie was Frankenhooker. Don't kill me. How little she was in the movie. Even though the movie is called Frankenhooker, it's really more about the making of Frankenhooker. She's only in the last 30 minutes of the movie. The parts she's in were awesome, and even though Jeffrey's actor had a great performance, I wanted to see more Frankenhooker. Overall, I give this movie a 4 out of 5 stars. If you care to see how I've rated other movies, give me a follow on Letterboxd, where I review all movies I watch, not just the ones for videos. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this movie, and I hope you'll watch it yourself. If there's any movies you'd like to see me review, please leave a comment and I'll give it a look-see. Please like, comment, and subscribe so you can stay tuned for my new videos. And again, thank you so much for my support on my first 2 videos. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you'll tune in again.